Now, how do we make our listener or our audience feel important? And we learned that the best way is to not look like giving gyan, but as if trying to take gyan from them. You see, when you are trying to give people gyan, nobody is interested unless they are really looking for it. But if you really want to ask for their opinion, everybody is willing to give their opinion because that makes them feel important. And therefore, we thought that the best way to start any communication or any speech is to ask a question, seek their opinion, ask for their views, and that make not only them interested, but they want to like to give or participate in that kind of discussion. It is a smart way of connecting with people. Instead of making statement, asking for their opinion or sounding as if you are asking for their opinion. Actually you are not. Actually you are planting your idea in their head, but you look like as if you are asking for their opinion by asking questions. So we thought this was the best way to start. Continue asking question, get some yeses, and when you have got several yeses, you have already put them in an affirmative mode. They are now emotionally ready to give yes to your final question and in turn agree to what you are asking them to agree. So we thought that we will also end our speech with a question, and these two questions will get connected with several plans, and these plans we defined as clock plan, which means we will give supporting evidence, proof, data, statistics, reasons, which will support the yes of our last question. Second plan was geography. We'll give all these things from different parts of the world, different locations of the world, and we called it a globe plan. Around the globe, around from every part of the globe or every part of our country, may it a village, town, big town, metropolitan cities, big urban centers, to establish and support the yes which we are looking for our last question, and in turn making that audience agree to what we want to make them agree. Third was that we were trying to sell the advantage or disadvantage or scare them with disadvantage if they don't follow, they don't agree to what we are asking. So we were giving them benefits, what they will get if they follow what we are asking them to follow, agree to what we are asking them to agree, and also telling them disadvantage when they don't agree, don't follow what we are asking them to follow. And the last plan we thought was any remaining issue, whether there is something which is still preventing them to agree to what we are asking them to agree, we will bring that issue and also prove that that issue is not also enough to hold them from agreeing to what we are asking them to agree. Cut them in pieces with reasons, with examples, with case studies, and so on. Or to give them a middle path or an alternative route of two diametrically opposite point of view which the audience are holding. So this is a part of the speech where we tackle the non-regular part of the whole argument, which is very specific to what subject we are talking about, and the last nail on the coffin or the last piece of argument to get our crucial yes from the audience. You will see, I'll just show you a very short film. You will see this entire structure is being used by Al Gore, who was almost elected as the president of the United States. And he actually got Nobel Prize for giving this presentation or speech or uh, in favor of things we need to do to save our planet from global warming or environmental hazard. Therefore, this is one speech which is considered one of the best speech ever given or best presentation ever given, and it got Nobel Prize. So far, people got Nobel Prize for making great life-saving inventions or a breakthrough philosophy or theory or principle in the you know humanity benefit and so on and so forth. Then people got Nobel Prize for writing great poetries, great work of literature. But nobody before Al Gore got any Nobel Prize for giving presentation. But this time he got Nobel Prize for giving presentation, and therefore it's worth seeing how that presentation is structured. And you'll see whatever we learned in the last class, the same principle, the same structure is followed by Al Gore in his presentation. So, and it's not something you can't do it yourself. You can also do it similar kind of presentation you can make. I told you that follow the structure when we are giving a speech, but you can also follow this principle or structure when you are giving a presentation. It's the same thing. And we'll also see after this film the tips from one of the world's greatest presenter, Steve Jobs, who was not only a great visionary, great inspirer to his entire team to create world-class product or life-transforming, world-changing products, but also sold those products, which is awe-inspiring presentation. I'll tell you how and what made Apple what it is today, what made Apple a great company, what made Apple to fight a company which was almost 1 lakh times bigger than Apple and arch competitor IBM. The main role in defeating or beating IBM by Apple was amazing ability of Steve Jobs to present his case. And we'll learn how Steve Jobs did it, what are the tips or what are the takeaways, what are the learnings we can all have, and how we can use that in preparing our presentation, which will be world class. But before we do that, we should see Al Gore's presentation. Al Gore's presentation, you will find that all these slides are used, and you'll see that he has very effectively used the emotion part just before the ending of the presentation and left the audience with emotionally charged so that they carry that message and the message stays with them for all times to come. So let's first watch this presentation, which is in the form of film, and then we'll go back to Steve Jobs' strategy of presenting.
They lost radio contact when they went around the dark side of the moon. and there was inevitably some suspense. Then when they came back in radio contact, they looked up and they snapped this picture, and it became known as Earthrise. And that one picture exploded in the consciousness of humankind. It led to dramatic changes. Within 18 months of this picture, the modern environmental movement had begun. My friend, the late Carl Sagan, used to say, if you had a big globe with a coat of varnish on it, the thickness of that varnish relative to that globe is pretty much the same as the thickness of the Earth's atmosphere compared to the Earth itself. And it's thin enough that we are capable of changing its composition. That brings up the basic science of global warming, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because you know it well. The sun's radiation comes in the form of light waves, and that heats up the Earth, and then some of the radiation that is absorbed and warms the Earth is re-radiated back into space in the form of infrared radiation. And some of the outgoing infrared radiation is trapped by this layer of atmosphere and held inside the atmosphere. And that's a good thing because it keeps the temperature of the Earth within certain boundaries, keeps it relatively constant and livable. But the problem is this thin layer of atmosphere is being thickened by all of the global warming pollution that's being put up there. And what that does is it thickens this layer of atmosphere. More of the outgoing infrared is trapped. And so the atmosphere heats up worldwide. That's global warming. And now we're beginning to see the impact in the real world. This is Mount Kilimanjaro more than 30 years ago and more recently. And a friend of mine just came back from Kilimanjaro with a picture he took a couple months ago. Another friend, Lonnie Thompson, studies glaciers. Here's Lonnie with a last sliver of one of the once mighty glaciers. Within the decade, there will be no more snows of Kilimanjaro. This is happening in Glacier National Park. I climbed to the top of this in 1998 with one of my daughters. Within 15 years, this will be the park formerly known as Glacier. Here is what's been happening year by year to the Columbia Glacier. It just retreats every single year. And it's a shame because these glaciers are so beautiful, but those who go up to see them, here's what they're seeing every day now. In the Himalayas, there's a particular problem because 40% of all the people in the world get their drinking water from rivers and spring systems that are fed more than half by the meltwater coming off the glaciers. And within this next half century, those 40% of the people on Earth are going to face a very serious shortage because of this melting. In fact, if you look at the 10 hottest years ever measured in this atmospheric record, they've all occurred in the last 14 years. And the hottest of all was 2005. We have already seen some of the heat waves that are similar to what scientists are saying are going to be a lot more common. A couple of years ago in Europe, they had that massive heat wave that killed 35,000 people. India didn't get as much attention, but the same year, the temperature there went to 122 degrees Fahrenheit. We have seen in the last couple of years a lot of big hurricanes. Hurricane Jeannie and Frances and Ivan were among them. And the same year that we had that string of big hurricanes, we also set an all-time record for tornadoes in the United States. Japan, again, didn't get as much attention in our news media, but they set an all-time record for typhoons. Previous record was 7. Here are all 10 of the ones they had in 2004. And then, of course, came Katrina. It's worth remembering that when it hit Florida, it was a Category 1, but it killed a lot of people and caused billions of dollars worth of damage. And then, what happened? Before it hit New Orleans, it went over warmer waters. As the water temperature increases, the wind velocity increases, and the moisture content increases. and you'll see Hurricane Katrina form over Florida. And then as it comes into the Gulf over that warm water, it picks up that energy and gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Look at that hurricane's eye. And of course, the consequences were so horrendous. There are no words to describe it. Flooding in Asia, Mumbai, India, this past July. 37 inches of rain in 24 hours. By far the largest downpour that any city in India has ever received. A lot of flooding in China also. Global warming paradoxically causes not only more flooding, but also more drought. This neighboring province right next door had a severe drought at the same time these areas were flooding. One of the reasons for this has to do with the fact that global warming not only increases precipitation worldwide, but it also relocates the precipitation. And focus most of all on this part of Africa, just on the edge of the Sahara. Unbelievable tragedies have been unfolding there, and there are a lot of reasons for it. But Darfur and Niger are among those tragedies. And one of the factors that has been compounding them is the lack of rainfall and the increasing drought. This is Lake Chad, once one of the largest lakes in the world. It has dried up over the last few decades to almost nothing, vastly complicating the other problems that they also have. The second reason why this is a paradox, global warming creates more evaporation off the oceans to seed the clouds, but it sucks moisture out of the soil. Soil evaporation increases dramatically with higher temperatures. This is the largest ice shelf in the Arctic, the Ward Hunt ice shelf. It just cracked in half 3 years ago. The scientists were astonished. I went up to the North Pole. I went under that ice cap in a nuclear submarine that surfaced through the ice like this. Since they started patrolling in 1957, they have gone under the ice and measured with their radar looking upwards to measure how thick it is, because they can only surface in areas where it's 3.5 feet thick or less. When the sun's rays hit the ice, more than 90% of it bounces off right back into space, like a mirror. But when it hits the open ocean, more than 90% of it is absorbed. And so as the surrounding water gets warmer, it speeds up the melting of the ice. Right now, the Arctic ice cap acts like a giant mirror. All the sun's rays bounce off more than 90%. It keeps the Earth cooler. But as it melts and the open ocean receives that sun's energy instead, more than 90% is absorbed. So there is a faster buildup of heat here at the North Pole, in the Arctic Ocean, and the Arctic generally, than anywhere else on the planet. That's not good for creatures like polar bears who depend on the ice. A new scientific study shows that for the first time they're finding polar bears that have actually drowned, swimming long distances, up to 60 miles, to find the ice. And they didn't find that before. But what does it mean to us to look at a vast expanse of open water at the top of our world that used to be covered by ice? On a worldwide basis, the annual average temperature is about 58 degrees Fahrenheit. If we have an increase of 5 degrees, which is on the low end of the projections, look at how that translates globally. That means an increase of only 1 degree at the equator, but more than 12 degrees at the pole. And so all those wind and ocean current patterns that have formed since the last ice age and have been relatively stable, they're all up in the air, and they change. In 1992, they measured this amount of melting in Greenland. 10 years later, This is what happened. And here's the melting from 2005. Tony Blair's scientific advisor has said that because of what's happening in Greenland right now, the maps of the world will have to be redrawn. If Greenland broke up and melted, or if half of Greenland and half of West Antarctica broke up and melted, this is what would happen to the sea level in Florida. This is what would happen to San Francisco Bay. A lot of people live in these areas. The Netherlands, one of the low countries, absolutely devastating. The area around Beijing, that's home to tens of millions of people. Even worse, in the area around Shanghai, there are 40 million people. Worse still, Calcutta, and to the east, Bangladesh, the area covered includes 60 million people. Think of the impact of a couple 100,000 refugees when they're displaced by an environmental event. And then imagine the impact of 100 million or more. When my generation, the baby boom generation, was born after World War II, the population had just crossed the 2 billion mark. Now, I'm in my 50s, and it's already gone to almost 6.5 billion. And if I reach the demographic expectation for the baby boomers, it'll go over 9 billion. So if it takes 10,000 generations to reach 2 billion, and then in one human lifetime, ours, it goes from 2 billion to 9 billion, something profoundly different's going on right now. We're putting more pressure on the earth. Most of it's in the poorer nations of the world. This puts pressure on food demand. It puts pressure on water demand. It puts pressure on vulnerable natural resources, and this pressure is one of the reasons why we have seen all the devastation of the forest, not only tropical, but elsewhere. It is a political issue. This is the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. One set of policies here, another set of policies here. Much of it comes not only because of cutting, but also burning. Almost 30% of all the CO2 that goes up each year into the atmosphere comes from forest burning. We've got to do a lot of things, not just one. If we use more efficient electricity appliances, we can save this much off of the global warming pollution that would otherwise be put into the atmosphere. If we use other end-use efficiency this much, if we have higher mileage cars this much, and all these begin to add up, other transport efficiency, renewable technology, carbon capture and sequestration, a big solution that you're going to be hearing a lot more about. They all add up, and pretty soon we are below our 1970 emissions. Each one of us is a cause of global warming, but each of us can make choices to change that. With the things we buy, the electricity we use, the cars we drive, we can make choices to bring our individual carbon emissions to zero. The solutions are in our hands. We just have to have the determination to make them happen. Are we going to be left behind as the rest of the world moves forward? All of these nations have ratified Kyoto. There are only 2 advanced nations in the world that have not ratified Kyoto, and we are one of them. The other is Australia. Let's take another picture of the Earth. You see that pale blue dot? That's us. Everything that has ever happened in all of human history has happened on that pixel. All the triumphs and all the tragedies, all the wars, all the famines, all the major advances. It's our only home. And that is what is at stake. Our ability to live on planet Earth, to have a future as a civilization. I believe this is a moral issue. It is your time to seize this issue. It is our time to rise again to secure our future. Future generations may well have occasion to ask themselves, what were our parents thinking? Why didn't they wake up when they had a chance? We have to hear that question from them now.
So you heard that presentation, saw the presentation. You saw that it was ended with presentation was ended with the emotional words by Al Gore, which said that we should hear that question from them now. You know, look at that pixel. That's us. That's our only home. Everything happened on that, and that is at stake. You see, emotion makes us take action, and therefore, in all presentation, we should use wherever possible emotional arguments, emotional evidences, emotional consequences, and so on. And particularly before ending the presentation, we should leave the audience or leave the listener emotionally charged, emotionally stirred, emotionally inclined to take action which we want them to take. That is the most powerful strategy to be used in all kinds of communication, including our presentation. Now we will see. Now you saw that in these all these slides, audio, visual, he used clippings from video, he used animation, he used visuals, he used photographs. In all kinds of presentation, we can use all these visuals, but visuals should support what we are saying. Other than visuals, the slides should have minimum number of words. The slide should not be speaking. We should be speaking while we are giving presentation. Slide can have only words or visuals, which will keep us on track, which will remind us what we have to say at this stage of our presentation, so that we don't get lost, we don't move in tangent, we stay on track. The work of the slide with visuals or words is only to keep us on track, so that we don't forget something which needs to be said, and we don't say something which doesn't need to be said. That is the purpose of the slide. But the slide should not be speaking. We should not put everything which we are going to speak on the slide. We should not write everything. In fact, slide should not be having the full sentences. It can only have just keywords which will remind us of the idea or the subject or the evidence or the support which we are going to say about our entire takeaway, which we want to say at the end of the speech. It should remind us, keep us on track by keywords. No full sentences are required. Although this presentation which I have downloaded from the net has all the presentation, has all the big sentences are also there, but normally it is not required. Now I'll just show you the presentation of the Al Gore, a presentation of the Steve Jobs, and you see that. Okay, so this says how to be insanely great in front of any audience. The audience can be a large number of audience, and it can also be small group of people while you are giving a presentation in a business setting, or you are giving a presentation on a Zoom, or you are giving a presentation to one. These days, even one-to-one communication when you are doing, when you are visiting somebody's office to sell your product or sell your services or sell your company, for investment and so on, normally the corporate style is to give presentation. So how to give that presentation? How to make our slides and what is to be said, what is to be avoided. It starts by saying that you can have the greatest ideas in the world, the most life transforming, the most powerful idea to change the humanity. As they say, that all the world's army cannot stop an idea whose time has come. Even that most powerful idea whose time has come and who cannot be stopped by all the world armies or all the powerful forces in the world also need to be communicated well. If it is not communicated well, the idea will remain in the mind of the inventor. And it has happened. In the past, we see in the history, a lot of great ideas were conceived by somebody else and used and propagated by somebody else much later. Because that idea was not communicated well or the idea was not spread well. So therefore, we also know how to communicate that idea in a very powerful manner. This is what this presentation will try to communicate. This is the book from which this presentation is made, and this book is available in our library. After seeing this presentation, you want to read the book and know fully well, go in the depth, read in details about these strategies and the tactics and the style you should use while giving a presentation. You are most welcome to read this book. It says, be forewarned, if you pick up this book, your presentation will never be same again. That means never be mediocre. It will be always a super presentation. Steve Jobs was not only a great visionary, but very captivating communicator on the world stage. If you adopt some of his techniques, your ideas and presentation will stand out of the sea of mediocrity. Most of the presentation you will see are all mediocre presentation, very boring presentation. People are put off by those presentations. See, let me tell you how Steve was instrumental in making Apple or their product Macintosh, the first computer introduced by Apple in the market, such a great launch and ultimately making the Apple such a great company was the historical event which happened when Apple decided to publicly launch their first product in the market in front of the press, in front of the industry leaders, in front of the industry top notch consumers, and the event was scheduled on a day and a time. IBM, which was the greatest rival of Apple, just to kill this event, also scheduled to launch their new products on the same day, in the same city, in the same time, hoping that everybody will congregate and come to IBM and not go to Apple's launch. And next day, the press will only cover IBM story, killing the Apple story. People went to both the places because the press, the industry, the consumers, everybody decided to send one of their representatives to Apple's event, one of their representatives to IBM's event. The crowd was divided, but the following day, it was all over was Apple, because the presentation given by Apple by Steve Jobs was such a powerful event, such a powerful presentation, that it was IBM's presentation which got sidelined, which was blacked out. What IBM thought will happen to Apple happened to them. Now, how was it possible? We learn while we go with this presentation. Now, tell me one thing. Is it possible for a person who is on the cover page of all the business magazines, who is a talked about professional as most successful, most dramatic, most life-changing CEO of one of the biggest company of a beverage, Pepsi, who actually took Pepsi from nowhere at the bottom of the pit to a rival which was worth, which actually beaten Coke in the wholesale market sales or departmental store sales from nowhere. When John Scully joined Pepsi, Pepsi was in such a dire condition that it was offered to be sold to Coca-Cola, and they refused. They thought Pepsi is not even worth looking at. It is such a gone. They thought they will close down. But after John Scully joined Pepsi, he took that company to great heights, so much so that it has beaten Coke in two important sales channels, in departmental stores and wholesaler. The only place where they couldn't beat Pepsi was as it was sold in McDonald's, and McDonald's having the largest number of outlets in retail sales, they were not able to. That means the soda fountain sales, they were still ahead of Pepsi. Now, at that height of glory, in a company which was 10,000 times bigger than Apple, Steve Jobs asked John Scully to leave Pepsi, come and join Apple, which was still a struggling company, at a salary half of what was paid by Pepsi, at a position which was lower than what he was in Pepsi. How can somebody will do it? Nobody knows. I mean, why should somebody do it? Because in Pepsi, he has achieved whatever was to be achieved. He was very comfortable. He had no work. He was not taking any risk with his career, with his reputation. He was already hailed as one of the greatest marketeer of the world. Why should he? That is a time to retire or time to continue with that kind of fat salary and practically no work and being worshipped by all the marketeers and by all the media and everything. But two lines written by Steve Jobs made John Scully change his mind. He left Pepsi and joined Apple at half the salary, at a position lower than what he held in Pepsi, in a company which was 10,000 times smaller than Pepsi, and where there was no guarantee he is going to succeed. In fact, he failed. But the line, it is the power of communication. And you will see what Steve Jobs wrote to John Scully. And here it is. Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want to have a chance to change the world? What he was doing in Pepsi, he was only selling sugared water. But in Apple, he had a possibility of opportunity to change the world, because Apple was making a product which will enhance the capability of each and every professionals, from doctors to lawyers to architects to artists, everyone in every profession. It was their big campaign, which followed after John Scully joined Apple, was the power to be the best, which actually said or communicated that when you buy an Apple product, you can be your best. And they had shown all people from different professions, from dancers to music composers to filmmakers to all kinds of people, architects, interior designers, research scientists, and so on. This is the power of communication. It can actually make people do things they don't think, which sounds impossible. Now, before that, the Steve Jobs said, or this is perceived also, that to be able to be a great performer or great speaker or great communicator or great presenter, you should be emotionally charged so much about that subject you are going to speak. You yourself should be so convinced, you should have so much of conviction of what you're doing. of what you're going to say. Unless you have that kind of conviction, you cannot communicate that conviction to others. You must first get convinced about what you're going to convince your audience. If you are not convinced, if you are not have that messianic sense of purpose, you are not have a fire in the belly about that subject, you cannot create that fire in the audience. So you must first have that fire in yourself. That fire will only come when you do something which you love, which you are passionate about. So first find what you love, find what you are passionate about, or you find a subject you love, or you find a subject you are passionate about, and then start talking about that subject. Like Al Gore was talking about global warming and a movement to stop global warming and to save the world. It has become his life's mission. Only then he could give this kind of presentation. Unless you are talking about something which is coming from your heart, deep in heart, you will not be able to give this kind of life transforming, game changing presentation. So find what you love and then speak about that. Now, most of the time, it is taught in B schools or in corporate world or in corporate seminars or corporate workshops that you should only talk rational things when you're giving a presentation. Stay rational, give solid evidence, give solid reasons, give solid statistics, data, and don't talk about emotions. But we are human beings, we are not machines. We don't get moved by data and statistics and reasons and hard evidence. We take action with emotions. As I told in the last few classes, the most important decision of our life, whom should we get married to, is based on emotions. It's not based on data. If that is true, we don't take action in life based on data and rationality. We take actions based on emotion and then justify those emotional actions by rational evidences and rational reasons. So therefore, when we are giving a presentation, use appropriate amount of emotions wherever there is a possibility. And to create an emotion, what we learned in the last few classes, tell a story. Human experiences, human stories, human case studies are the most powerful way of convincing people to take action, most powerful way of emotionally connect them with you, emotionally connect with your story, emotionally connect with you with whatever you are saying, asking them to do. So create a story, and then we'll talk about deliver an experience. Let them go through that story with the same kind of emotion which you felt when you went through that experience yourself, or somebody else went through that experience when they were going through that experience. And the last, and we'll talk about this and refine and rehearse. You see, your presentation will continuously improve with practice. Unless you practice, unless you do it every day, unless you do it again and again, unless you do it on every opportunity you get to give a presentation or speak, your presentation and your speech will not improve. The single most important thing you can do dramatically to improve your presentation is to have a story to tell before you work on your PowerPoint profile. This is what we learned in the last few classes when we were talking about that a story is more powerful than thousands and thousands of data and statistics. While we were discussing, I told you how to use a story to put your point across, draw a conclusion, and ask for action. Talk to get action. This is a famous speech given by Steve Jobs in Stanford University on their convocation. It's a most watched YouTube video. It has got some tens of millions of views. Please go and watch it if you have not already watched. Here, Steve Jobs will talk about 3 stories of his life, and it is considered to be one of the best speech ever given in a convocation. We don't have time today to watch. Please go and watch it in your house after this presentation and see how powerful, very simple, but sharing of these 3 stories are really life transforming stories. Now, the Steve Jobs says that before you start your PowerPoint presentation, first you structure your whole speech. First you decide How are you giving? What are you going to say? How will you start your speech? How will you end your speech? What will you do in the middle? We only learned that while we were learning about those plans. Once your entire planning is done on the piece of paper, then only you start making your slides. So you should spend a lot of time in planning, sketching, thinking, collecting evidences, collecting visuals, collecting videos, collecting animations, making animations, all that before you decide which animation, which videos, which clippings, which visuals, what thoughts you will say, when you will say, in which order you will say in your presentation. So a lot of time should be spent in planning, sketching, collecting information from various sources. And he said 2/3 time should be spent in doing that, 1/3 time only to make the slides. So thinking, sketching, scripting, 90 hours is required normally, used to require Steve Jobs to make 30 slides, then building slides, and then rehearsing. And please use something which is unusual but easy to read. So he said create Twitter-like headlines. Now this is the sample slide from Steve Jobs' presentation, which only shows the picture of the thinnest notebook or laptop which they have created. They just show the picture of this and the head and the bottom line says MacBook Air, the world's thinnest notebook. Nothing else. Minimalistic in terms of words to be used on slide. You see, the greatest advertising guru, David Ogilvy, said not to use more than 6 words on a hoarding. And the same principle applies on slides, because slide is also viewed from a distance like a hoarding is viewed from a distance. Here, David Ogilvy made a concession. He said 6 words in 6 lines, maximum 36 words you can use in a slide. Not more than that, because you have more time to see a slide. You don't have that much time to see a hoarding. So 6 words in six lines, maximum. The lesser, the better. And only attributes. Look at this picture. And it's iPod, it says 1000 songs in your pocket. It doesn't talk about the technical superiority of this product or what kind of material is used, what is the screen technology, what is the technology of the backend, what is the battery lifetime, and all that is not taught, all the talked. It's only talking about 1000 songs in your pocket. It's very unusual. People are interested in benefits. They are not interested in what you are putting in. They are more interested in how does this product going to benefit me? What is it which I'm going to gain by using this product or buying this product? Talk in terms of benefit to the client or the listener, not your input. How hard you have worked, how many long hours you'll put is not interested. The buyer is not interested. The listener is not interested in what you have done. The listener is only interested in what it can do for me. Please talk about that only. So create a story, deliver an experience. By creating a story, you are already delivering an experience, but you can also deliver a further experience by talking about what this story can do for you. How can your life change if you follow what I'm asking you to do? And refine and rehearse, very, very important. With every rehearsal, every practice, your presentation style, your presentation power will improve. You will become very, very relaxed while giving the presentation because you have rehearsed it so many times. It doesn't require any effort for you to now talk naturally. And the more natural you become, the less stress and tension free you become, the more powerful your presentation will look. So most of the time the presentation was done by Steve Jobs, but he always brought in experts from the industry to endorse what he was talking about. to talk about that. You see, you must understand that when you're talking about a product or your service where you have a vested interest, it is better to get third party endorsement. Third party endorsement looks like neutral endorsement by people who are not having an agenda, who doesn't have any interest in saying what they are saying. So therefore, you can always use somebody else to support what you're saying in terms of videos, in terms of if they are physically present, they can also talk about that physically and so on. And introduce an antagonist. See, a film without a villain is not very engaging. So Steve Jobs in every presentation talked about his arch rival IBM. Normally people say don't talk about your competitor when you're doing a presentation because it only reminds your target about the existence of your competitor. You may not be knowing about the existence, but you are making them know. But in case of Steve Jobs anyway, IBM was much stronger brand to start with, and it was not that nobody knows about IBM. And when Steve Jobs talked about IBM, I mean, people will remember about IBM. Nothing like that happened. He always talked about IBM and showed how Steve Jobs was product, Apple's product was superior than IBM. He was not hiding. He was not avoiding unpleasant or uncomfortable questions to answer from the public. In fact, he was going head on and took the IBM's claim or IBM's attack on Apple and answered those attacks or with suitable answers. This is part of our plan number 4, which we talked about, triangular plan, where you take the last portion of the doubt which is lingering on the mind of your audience and attacking it head on, taking it and cutting them into pieces. This is what Steve Jobs was also doing. In every presentation, IBM cases, IBM products was brought in and explained why Apple's product was superior than IBM's. And eliminate clutter. Please don't talk about things which are not relevant. Please don't go in tangent. Please don't even talk about a sentence. Keep your presentation as brief as possible. If you can say the same thing with less number of words in a sentence, use those less number of word sentences. If you can have a choice between two words where one word has more letters, the other is less, use the word with less letters. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. The simpler is your presentation, brief is your presentation, the more powerful it becomes. And we also talked about in the last presentation where to end your presentation. If the audience is already convinced, please stop. Don't continue talking. Please stop it then and there. And Steve Jobs says one slide should have only one thought. No bullet points means that no two thoughts should come in slide. If necessary, increase the number of slides, but don't crowd the slide with too many thoughts. One slide can have only one word if that is what is required, but only that word, so that the mind of the audience, the brain of the audience, the thought of the audience doesn't wander and jump to the next thoughts. If you keep the next thought still unavailable to the audience and you're only talking about the thought which is appearing on the slide, one thought, the chances are you will get more attention and more concentration of the audience. Here is saying average PPT slide 40 words, but Steve Jobs had much less, and he used as many as whenever there was a possibility of using a picture instead of a word, he used to replace the word with a picture, because picture has superiority effect. If word can be seen or retained by 10%, the picture of the bird is retained by 65%, because that is what is the behavioral scientist and brain mapping scientists have studied and concluded. This is the normal slide which the techies used to use when any presentation used to happen in the Silicon Valley. They were basically talking about how much they have put in the gadget. You know, what is the power of the gadget? What is the memory power? What is the battery life? What is the computing power? What is the, the chip generation and so on and so forth. Steve Jobs always avoided this kind of information. His presentation was like that my MacBook Air is so thin that it can fit into the envelope of the US Post. This is what he demonstrated while he was giving the presentation. This is what he was selling was the benefit to the consumer, not story of the creator of the product, but how that product is going to benefit the consumer or the buyer. So the Steve Jobs presentation was very unlike, let's say, Bill Gates presentation or many other people's presentation, which was full of theory, technical jargons, technical words, and highly technical, so that ordinary people could not understand. Whereas Steve Jobs' presentation was simple, less abstract, fewer words. See, it is always said that a great speaker, great presenter makes complicated things simple, not simple things complicated. Most of the technical presentation given by Silicon Valley professionals were technically so much heavy that it was very, almost impossible for an ordinary person to understand those presentations. Steve Jobs' presentation was very easy to understand. And dress up numbers, you can sometimes show your weakness as strength, or rather perceived weakness as strength. They are not actually weakness, but they are made to look like a weakness. You see, we all know that the number of IBM sold till date is at least few thousand times more than the number of Apple computers sold. Does it mean that Apple computer is not as popular? Market share of IBM and IBM clone is much higher. It's almost 60-70%, or maybe even more, of the entire computer market. Then Apple must be having only 10% or 12% of the computer market. Does it mean that Apple is not so popular? Apple inferior product? Not at all. Let's see how Steve Jobs present this case. He says, first of all, he says the benefits, most of the time the benefits are more, although the price is more also, but people will forget about the price. People will always remember the quality. People will always remember your superiority of the product. He always enhanced or spoke about the superiority of the product, and he always put numbers in a way that it enhances the prestige of the product. He used to say, my market share is less than the market share of BMW, or more than the market share of BMW and Mercedes car. Now, Mercedes car and BMWs are not having very high market share. Does it mean that Mercedes and BMW are not great cars? Because they are great cars, because they are most sought after cars, because they are prestige cars, their market share is less. The market share of ordinary products are higher. Market share of superior products are always less, and therefore the less market share of IBM make it a superior product instead of an inferior product. Now, this is how a new product benefit was sold, while they were talking about the industry accepted norm, which used to say that this is a supercomputer. It has the capacity of processing is petaflop. Now, what is petaflop? 1,000 trillion calculation per second. IBM knew that the number would be meaningless. It's simply too big. IBM added following description, the press release. Now, what is petaflop? Now, look at how this is explained by Steve Jobs. Said if you put 1000 fastest computer one on the top of other and run it parallelly, that makes one petaflop. And the pile will be almost 1.5 mile high. And before ending the presentation, he used to make a most charged event or part of that event where the entire audience was so much charged that they really became the follower of IBM product, follower of Apple and Apple products for their lifetime. This was revealed as a holy shit moment. The last greatest thing used to come at the end. So it says that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel important, how you made them feel. And nobody will forget when you make them feel most important. This is how the Apple's presentation always ended, where they made the audience feel very, very important, very charged. They charmed the entire audience by making them feel great. And this we can do with asking questions, making them shout, making them talk in chorus. That is the thing normally we see when Mr. Modi is giving a lecture and he makes the whole audience, answer his questions and things like that. Now, this is the history of Apple. With every presentation, Steve became a better and better presenter, and they found that every presentation, people had an increase in dopamine in their blood because their happiness quotient has gone up, their positivity has gone up, their euphoric emotions has gone up. This is what Steve Jobs' presentation did to people. Every word used in the slide was very carefully chosen. It is the way you write a poetry. You see, what is it which poetry does, which the prose doesn't do? Poetry is able to convey much more content with much less words. They are able to convey emotions in a much better manner than a prose can give. The words which was chosen by Steve Jobs for his slides were full of emotions, full of benefits, full of content. That is how he chose less and less words, more and more powerful words, more and more emotional words. And he mastered the stage presence. Everything was rehearsed. His entire movement on the stage, the lights, the sound, everything was well planned and well rehearsed. He looked very casual on the stage. Doesn't mean he was casual. That casualness came from his hard work and practice. And he kept this eye contact, open posture. I always tell, please don't close your hands. Don't put your hands at the back. Don't play with your hands. Use your hands because they are the most powerful weapon you have to animate your presentation or speech. Hand gestures, and please use your smile as often as possible while you are giving presentation. Your smile is the one which will connect you with the audience. Body language, vocal tone, and practice. So it says his sense of informality, his sense of casualness on the stage came because it was backed by grueling hours of practice. It was practice which made him so perfect on the stage. And weeks before the actual date of presentation, he was practicing, getting feedback, getting his practice recorded, watching this practice, seeing, making improvement, and so on and so forth. There's a book called Outliers. It is there in our college library, which says that if you want to become great in any field, you need 10,000 hours of practice. People who had been able to achieve these 10,000 hours of practice became great performers, starting from Beatles, starting from Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. All of them who were great performers had minimum 10,000 hours of practice, whether it's a Pele in football or whether anybody in sports or anybody in any other field. The practice is so important. So his presentation style improved with every year passed, with a lot of practice adding to his skills. And wear our appropriate costume. Please wear such costume which will make you part of the crowd. Don't wear costumes or dress which will intimidate the crowd, which will make the crowd feel you are not part of them. So whether you are going to a fashion show or you are going for a techie presentation, you have to actually be dressed like the rest of the crowd. And one more thing which will make your presentation great is to have fun. Don't get stressed or tensed. Look forward to your presentation. Enjoy the presentation. Have fun while giving the presentation. Feel nice when you are giving presentation. Yeah. So thank you so much. This is the end of the presentation. This was the last line he mentioned when he was giving the talk in the Stanford University, which I said you must go and watch, where he narrates 3 stories from his life and asks the audience, the graduating class of Stanford University, to follow what were the takeaways from these 3 experiences of life. So thank you so much. Now, if you have any question, please ask.
Sir, actually, I'm Rishabh Mukherjee. I have a question.
Yeah.
So I didn't get what actually revealing a holy shit moment means.
Give something which is unexpected. Do something which is not done by anybody else. Delight or surprise your audience, which will make them too pleased. Holy shit moment means something which is unexpected. Anything which is unexpected, anything which is out of the world, anything which is nobody thought of. Yeah. It can be like when Michael Jackson was giving his show. I had been in one of his shows in Bremen in Germany. When he came, actually, he came from there was a blast on the stage and it looked as if he was coming from the ground. And when he went, he actually put a rocket at his back, and the rocket was fired and he went in the air. That was his entry and that was his exit. Something unusual. Now you can't do all these things in a presentation, but you can do many things which are in the presentation, like the the whole big size of this MacBook was coming from the sky. It was like descending from the sky, where a lot of music and a lot of lights was used. Something like, it was not an ordinary presentation, it was like a stage show. He made the presentation, took it to the level of a stage show. The people felt that they have come to some kind of a stage show instead of coming for a boring presentation. So that is what is meant by holy shit. Give them something which they have never dreamt possible.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else? See, normally we can't do anything like that, but then we can think of doing something extraordinary, something different. You can bring us something, in the presentation, you can bring something physical and show them, look, this is it. Or do some experiment in front of them and say, this is, and prove your point or something like that. Something different. Yeah, that's the holy shit. You must all go and watch this speech of Steve Jobs in Stanford University if you have not done so far. I am really impressed by his speech. Yeah, any other question, please? Now you have an assignment. Please make a presentation. And mind you, this presentation will carry marks. I have to give you marks for your, as you know, that university exams may not be happening. So the internal marks will contribute to 100% of your marks, which will be given by the university. Now, this presentation which you are going to give, if you don't give, you get a 0. So all of you should give the presentation. Now, here, I will put 50% marks or 50% weightage to the novelty of the subject. That means you have to go and do some research, find out something which is unusual, find out something. This is the holy shit moment. Find out something which people have not heard, don't know. I want to see how much research capability you've got. Go and find out something absolutely out of the blue. And you'll find tens and thousands of such things on the net if you really spend some time and find out. Something you have never heard, nobody has heard. That is the subject. And then make the presentation according to what you've learned. So your 50% weightage is on the subject, choice of the subject. 50% weightage is on how you presented your case, how good you were in your organizing thoughts and conveying that in an orderly fashion, using emotional words, these evidences in a manner so that your audience get convinced to take action, or audience is convinced about whatever you want them to agree. And you have to give this presentation on Zoom, and I'll be watching. In fact, I'll be learning from you. We are reversing the role. And not only me who will be learning, every one of us, all the participants, all the class, all the people who will be watching this presentation will be learning something new. Just imagine if we are 100 people and 100 people are talking about 100 subjects which we know nothing about. What can be our learning experience after this session? This kind of discoveries one man cannot do. But all of us, if we put our efforts and find out at least one thing which is unknown or looks like unknown, or at least 70-80% of the audience doesn't know about it, if we give this presentation, what an impact this session will have, where it will take our level of awareness and knowledge. So just do it. It is compulsory, because if you don't do, you don't get any marks.
So does the subject needs to be something on educational purposes, or can it be anything?
It can be anything. I want to see how you present, how good you are in your research. See, research capability is not restricted to only scholars, only people from academic field. It is also important for all of us, even people from business, even people from profession. Your success in business will depend how unique is your idea. And therefore, your ability to find such unique idea is one of the most important skills you will need as a businessman. It is not restricted only to academicians and research scholars and research scientists. It's also applicable on very, very successful businessmen also. Find something which others are not able to see right now. You are the first to identify. I was the first to identify 2 opportunities in Germany when I went there, and I made a lot of money in Germany. The established players were not able to see it. I was taking scrap from Germany, getting paid for getting the scrap, selling it again in India and getting paid twice. Nobody could identify this opportunity. I was the first. By the time the rest of the world identified, the business was finished, because too many people entered in that business. But I made a killing as long as that idea was only in the hands of the few people. So your ability to find that new idea is the most important skill you will require in doing business. Please go and find out anything. Sky's the limit, man. The entire horizon is open. You can talk about anything. New places not discovered by people, new business ventures not thought of, new ideas which are people are applying, new product they have made, anything new, anything which we don't know. I should give you some ideas. See, you must see this OMG India. You know, there's a program OMG India, which is there in the, if you go on the YouTube, you'll find. This guy goes to places and finds something unique which is happening in India in different parts of the world. I've seen most of these programs because I like that. People doing amazing things. We have not heard something amazing they are doing. You can actually took that, some of the ideas, and give a presentation on that. That's also acceptable. I have seen doesn't mean that everybody has seen. You can give presentation. Somebody is doing something which is unthinkable, unheard of. So 50% weightage on the uniqueness of idea, uniqueness of the information, and particularly for media students, this is the thing you should do as a journalist. You have to find out something which your competitor is not able to find out. Because as long as it is new, it is news. The moment everyone knows, it is no longer news, it's stale news. So please go and find out. We'll have next week, starting with these kind of presentation, you will have 4 days, because in any case, one day we can't complete all the presentation. 4 days we'll have. You can come and give presentation on any of these days. Please book, send when you're ready with the presentation to Meghamala. I'll come and hear all these presentations. And it better should be good, yeah. Do a good job. After listening to Steve Jobs' style of presentation and how much hours he used to spend to find out what he has to say, how he is going to say, practice, and then keep on improving his slides. At least we should try to copy him and give this presentation. And mind you, if you don't give presentation, you are going to get 0. I don't want to fudge figures. You are not given, get 0. And if you are given, even if your presentation bad, let me tell you, you still will get pass marks or high marks. If your idea is unique, I'll give you 100 out of 100 in the uniqueness of the idea. So that's it. Anything else? Meghamala, are you there?
Sir, is there any limit to the number of slides we have to make?
Try to finish your presentation in, let's say, 5 or 7 minutes. So ideally, your slide should not be more than 10 to 12 slides. Not more than 10 slides. 8 to 10
Sir, and the
slides.
language has to be English only?
No, not necessary. You can speak in Bengali if you want.
Okay.
I want to see your presentation skills. I want to see how good research you have done. Language is no barrier. You can have mix. You can speak in Bengali, Hindi, English mixed. No problem. You can speak in English, you can speak in Hindi, you can speak in Bengali, you can speak in 3 mixed language. I want to see how good you are in collecting information and communicating that information. Language is no barrier. And I can tell you this will be an amazing session. It has been always an amazing session, because just imagine 100 people coming with 100 new ideas, 100 different ideas we have not heard. We have no inkling about this existence of such things, and just we become knowledgeable about 100 new things in a very short time. It's an amazing session. I can't do it. Nobody can do it alone. It's only 100 people trying to work together that they can bring out these 100 ideas in front of 100 people. It's going to be an amazing session.
Okay, so you have to prepare your presentation on any topic, do a well research, use the techniques as taught by sir. And I want the names of those who will be presenting. Do you want me to send you the names of those who will be presenting group wise, or you will come yourself? See, last 2
Ma'am,
week, last 2,
better if it's
yes, go ahead. Sorry, can you please speak again?
Ma'am, I think it will be better if we decide the groups.
Yeah, I think it's better, but then everyone has to be present. It's not like that one group is giving so others will not be there. I want all the attendance. See, till 9:20 we had 89 people, 84 people, then 86. After 9:40 it went up to 91 people. Who have joined after 9:30? people who have joined after 9 o'clock. How do you expect to give a presentation on Monday with this technique if you are joining at 9 o'clock? And I don't want to repeat it again. Last week also you were not coming up. What I propose, I will ask your coordinators to give me your names, and if you're speaking for 2 to 3 minutes per presenter, so I expect in 1 hour we will be finished with at least 40 people we should finish, right?
Yes, ma'am.
30 to 40 people, but I know it's not possible. 30 will be too much high. So I will give you the names of the 30 peoples. I will just pick up randomly and send you the names. Hope everyone is getting my mails,
Yes, ma'am.
or maybe I can send you across in WhatsApp. Okay. So prepare your, see, if you are not presenting, name is on Monday and you are not giving your present, you are getting a 0. If you have any doubts, you can call me, WhatsApp, you can mail me. All the options are open to all of you. Everyone has my number? Who is this Khoka?
No, ma'am.
Who is this Khoka?
Okay.
What's your full name, my dear? How do you expect me to give me your attendance? Okay, I'm just giving in chat my number. Please carry, take it. Okay?
1 minute.
Ma'am, like the topic can be anything random, like
Yeah,
no
ma'am.
specific things are there.
Anything random. Not a, it should be uncommon. The most important thing is that it should be uncommon. It should be catchy. It should be mind-boggling. And I am sure during this lockdown period, you must be having, you have heard such ideas. You must have observed something. You must have seen something. You must have heard something.
Ma'am, hello.
Yes, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Ma'am,
Yeah,
I was
go
just
ahead.
thinking that maybe I could represent my own presentation by myself if I don't want to go into groups.
No, it's not a group. You will be presenting yourself. It's not a group work. It's not a group work. You will be presenting yourself. You have to create your own ideas and you have to present yourself. It's an individual numbering, dear. Grouping is for the days when you will be presenting. Names I will be giving you for the names who will be presenting. Because नहीं तो ना तुम लोग से पहले आप करोगे और कोई नहीं आएगा. I don't want that to happen. And I will just pick random from any batch. So be prepared. Everyone should be prepared by Monday. I will just pick up the names randomly from any batch. All the total number of students. Everyone should be prepared. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Don't expect that I will give you the names today. I will give you the names for those who will be presenting on Monday morning. Maybe on Saturday I will send you the names. So you have to be prepared from now onwards. From this moment you have to start thinking. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Any questions?
No, ma'am.
No.
Okay, some tips. Be prepared to give it on video if possible. I hope everyone will be possibly be giving it with their video on. So wear formals. Try to give a proper presentation in a formal condition. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Bye.